This is the Just Basketball Show on January 25th, the debut episode, a new show. We are excited. I am Brendon Kleen. That is Chris Manning. We are thrilled to get started here today. You can subscribe or follow on all podcast platforms. Give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Rate and subscribe here on the Just Basketball Fans YouTube channel. You can also follow us on TikTok at Just B-Ball Fans and on Instagram at Just Basketball Show. Chris, we swore we would not talk about the Lakers. We have a big trade to get to. They're making us talk about them anyway. We have 5 trades we want to see right now, not on February 9th when the NBA trade deadline actually happens. Today, we want to see them. We'll get to those later. How are you feeling about episode number 1? It's a long time coming. We could not be more excited to get this thing going. Tell me how you feel, man.
Look, I'm pumped. It is great to be here with you. You and I remember talking to you about this like 2 years ago originally as like just a glimmer in hope at Summer League in Las Vegas as we're walking back to Bally's after watching basketball all day. We're really excited to come to you, our viewers, our listeners, talk about the NBA, talk about the WNBA, talk about everything going on in basketball. For those of you who don't know, I'm based in Cleveland. I primarily cover the Cavs. I've written for places like Dime and Cleveland Magazine and SB Nation and host Locked On Cavs. Brendon is based out in Phoenix. You know, he's written for Bright Side of the Sun, hosts Locked On Suns, writes for Dime, writes for all kinds. Like, we've been around. We've done a lot. We love hoops. We have a great team. A couple of people I think we should say thank you to and that people maybe already know. First, Jake Stevens. He produces Locked On Cavs with me. I'm very excited to have him producing this show for us as well. And shouts to the guys from Just Baseball who launched something really incredible and are expanding into basketball now. Aram, Peter, Jack, the whole team at Den of Geek as well. We're really excited to get going on this. And as Brendon said, we did say, part of our initial pitch was like, look, we're not going to over talk about the Lakers. And then yet today, here we are, like we have to talk about the Lakers. So like this feels like karma, you know? Like this feels like karma that we have to do this, unfortunately.
Yeah, we have our various reasons, I think, you and I both, of not loving this team. They stole your franchise's centerpiece player a few years ago. They beat the crap out of the team that I cover and care about most of the time when they play in the playoffs. But let's get to it. The Lakers made a trade on Monday for Rui Hachimura. He was a top 10 pick 3 years ago, which is a little bit of a crazy thing to say about a player who just got dealt. They only had to give up Kendrick Nunn, who's 11th on the Lakers in minutes this season, and 3 second-round picks. Now, Hachimura will be a restricted free agent this summer. He's had an up-and-down career. He hasn't been able to stay on the floor a ton. He hasn't been prioritized, it seems like, with the Wizards. They've had the number 10 pick, it seems like, for a decade. All those guys are vying for minutes. What do you make of this deal, Chris? Is this actually going to help the Lakers? Is this just them waving around something that they did in LeBron's face to say, see, we're not standing pat. We're making moves, buddy. Here you go. Stay here. Stay in Los Angeles.
My brain went to LeBron. My brain went to wondering, like, what does he think about this? Because this isn't the all-in chips on the table move to make them a contender. I like Hachimura. I like when teams will try to like rehabilitate like a former lottery pick, a guy with talent, particularly a guy of Hachimura's size. Like that is the kind of player I think all team size-wise need more of. Like Cleveland, for instance, should take a stab like this if they could find it. This is a trade that I think like makes sense in that sense, but like does it move the needle for the Lakers? Do I think differently really about their ceiling or where they could be based on this trade? I don't. And there's also the financial aspect of it that is almost, I think, more interesting than like what Hachimura is going to do in a basketball sense, right? Like he'll be an RFA in the summer, as you said. That's going to eat into cap space. They would have been a team that could have gone out and pursued, Kyrie Irving has been kind of the big UFA out there, but they could have spent some money in free agency with Russ coming off the books. This, I think, in all likelihood, hinders what they can do to maybe push for next season, which is just like a very interesting thing to consider. And I wonder what LeBron thinks about this. Like I generally, if you got true serum into him and wonder how he feels about this trade, I would be kind of curious. I like going to get a forward for them. I like a guy that has the upside as a scorer, as a shooter. Like maybe you can get more out of him in an environment where say, hey, you're going to play with LeBron. You can earn money by playing really well with him down the stretch. I'm curious to see how he's deployed. I'm curious to see how this all works out. I don't think this is a needle-moving trade by any stretch of the imagination, though.
No, and people have pointed out that he's been a pretty good corner 3-point shooter for a few years now. That was a knock on his game. Part of the reason that pick was criticized is he was really just like a Carmelo Anthony type in college at Gonzaga, and then he's developed that. So that's going to help when he's playing off of the superstars on this team. I think you'll see him probably be able to make a pretty big impact in those bench lineups with Russ. Once AD gets back, those backup reserve units tend to push the pace a little bit more for the Lakers. You could see him. He's a very good athlete, all things considered. That should be an area where he can dominate. I feel like he kind of only has to be better than guys like Juan Toscano-Anderson, Lonnie Walker, Troy Brown. If he can just surpass a couple of those guys, he'll play. And yeah, it's not a needle mover. To your point about LeBron, this can't be all they do. I don't think it will be all they do. We're continuing to hear rumors, and this is not going to get them to be a championship contender. But I also think there is something to be said for being opportunistic, going out and getting a player like this. He is a number 9 pick. He had talent for a reason. And we'll see. They've actually had a good track record developing players like this, sort of these reclamation projects, as you called them, or guys who second draft types of players, etc. So I'm optimistic he can continue to develop his game. I don't know if he's a difference maker when you're talking about can they get to a second round or even out of the play-in, whatever their hopes are come the summertime. Let's transition over to bigger moves, although they haven't quite happened yet. Over on the WNBA side of things, we have Breanna Stewart, the biggest superstar probably in the entire league, a former MVP. She has won more than just about any basketball player on the planet when you go back to her absolute dominance at UConn, 2 championships with the Seattle Storm, and she is a free agent now. She has been tweeting cryptic emojis to give us clues, and then Ramona Shelburne, Chris, finally decoding those emojis for us over on Twitter. She's from ESPN, of course, telling us that Stewie will meet with the Lynx, Mystic, Storm, and Liberty this summer. She's doing it basically now. She's over in Turkey playing overseas as that season wraps up, and these teams are coming to wine and dine her. Is Stewie really going to move? Are we seeing a generational player change teams here in the WNBA? What's your read?
Well, I think even beyond, I think yes. Like if I had to guess, like it seems like yes. Like the Liberty stuff was kind of out there last summer. It seems also just like the Liberty are kind of trying to get into super team mode with Sabrina Ionescu and Jungle Jones, and if they get Stewie, they're going to get Vandersloot, and like that's going to be like a really just interesting team, even if the pieces don't totally like necessarily you would kind of perfectly all kind of blend together on paper. What I think is interesting though, Brendon, is I feel like this feels to me, considering what Stewie is kind of publicly advocating for the flight stuff in particular, and considering her leverage, this is someone at the top of her profession, at the top of that league, that is demanding change. That is demanding like perhaps structural change to the way that this league works and the way that the players in the WNBA are taken care of. And like anyone who follows that league and is a fan of it understands that like the travel stuff is a big deal. It was 2 years ago the Aces had a game canceled or postponed because they had all the issues coming from Vegas to Washington D.C. because of normal flights. She is using her leverage as a free agent to try and push for something very different. And that to me is like, yes, like if she goes to Liberty or the Mystics or goes back to Seattle, that it's going to be a big deal. And that's a big basketball story. But I think almost the biggest thing coming out of this will be like, okay, if some of this stuff with travel changes, and you've seen players like in the NBA, like Ja Morant support her in this, right? That could be the biggest change coming out of all of this. And that's a big deal. That's a really, really, really big deal for the WNBA, the health of its players, and the players getting something I think they frankly deserve.
It is absolutely way bigger than basketball here. I mean, I compare this to Diana Taurasi when she sat out a season a few years back here in Phoenix, and her Russian team, the one that players aren't really playing for anymore, separate story we all know, paid for her to not play, right? Yeah. Like, there's been these moments that are really inflection points for the history of this league. This is one of them. Stewie is a humongous star. Like, you cannot understate it. She has a signature shoe. She is the high one, among the highest paid players in not only this league but all of Europe as well. And she's a singular talent. She is, whether you want to compare her to Kevin Durant or whoever, she has broken how we think about basketball with her height and her size and her shooting ability and everything else. But like you just said, she's shooting higher than that. And she was somebody last offseason when she was also a free agent before she returned to the Storm who criticized the new rules about overseas travel for these players or competition for these players, where the league is now, it's going into effect this season, going to fine players if they don't return from overseas quickly enough in time for the start of the season. I think an owner that might be willing to pay some of those fines for her or work with the league in some way to flex and get them out of that pickle, an owner who's going to work with her to get these chartered flights, which is the fight you were referencing that people have taken on in the past. Owners, the new owners who come in, whether it's the Raiders owner, whether it's Joe Tsai, who owns the Liberty, which is a team that probably is the front runner to get Stewie. These guys come in and they're flabbergasted at how terrible the working conditions are for these athletes. And it does not surprise me to see that they are on the list, that the Storm, who have a pretty committed ownership group, obviously they're the incumbent team. It's the only team she's ever played for, that those franchises are at the top of her list. We will not, I think, say goodbye to this story. We don't know where she'll actually end up. We'll keep tabs on it. But it's not just where does maybe the best player in the WNBA end up. It's how does her free agency shape the future of the WNBA. It's really that big. The NBA doesn't have a lot of these. Maybe LeBron with the decision, maybe Kareem refusing to get drafted by such and such team. There's a few of these in NBA history, but the WNBA, with how young it is, these things come pretty constantly right now, and the players kind of don't take BS at all from the owners, from the league, and they're more willing to fight, I think, outwardly and publicly. So it's going to be fascinating to see where this goes.
Well, and on top of that, we also have this De'Arca Hamby trade where she goes from the Aces to the Sparks, and the statement she put out on her Instagram alleging, mistreatment from the Aces that prompted a WNBPA statement. Like, there's like these big. This feels like a moment where the players are flexing their power a little bit, and they're going to push for some things, and I think that's good. I think at times it feels like the league and the sport is always about the players first. It just is. And obviously the corporate interests have a big say in that. But I think the story of the WNBA the last 3-4 years has been that the players are driving all of this. That it's about them. It's about, Asia Wilson becoming like a super duper star. The farewell and everything that Super got. The way that the league reacted to Kelly Loeffler and her role with the Atlanta Dream. Like, all of this stuff has been player driven. This feels like two things in different ways, and we don't know a ton about the Hamby situation and what that looks like, but that's a big deal. But Brendon, before we move on from this, I want to ask you in a basketball sense, where do you want to see, what would be the most fun Stewie outcome for her? Where her going? Where's the most fun outcome?
We don't really know what it would look like with the Lynx. They have a lot of questions. They spent their money pretty badly. Cheryl Reeve, the GM and president over there, has, I think she said in her podcast recently, like, I screwed up free agency a couple years ago and we can't really do what we want because I was bad at my job. So I kind of put them as a distant fourth here. I think the Liberty thing would be pretty fascinating. I personally am the type that loves super teams, so give me as many of them as we can get on all sides of basketball. The Storm, we know what that looks like. So from an entertainment standpoint, I'm probably discounting that just because it would be kind of the same old. But that brings us to the Mystics, which I don't think a lot of people are talking about. I have not studied. WNBA cap stuff is a nightmare to sift through because they have very different rules in the NBA. But the idea of Stewart and Elena Delle Donne together, this is like Kevin Durant and Jason Tatum playing on the same team. Whatever big wings who do freakish stuff, to two of them on one team that you want to put as the comp here, that's what this would be. And I think both of them have revolutionized what basketball can be in that league in general. The two of them together, I'm just kind of drooling thinking about it, but I don't know how likely it is. I don't know how possible it is, but that's what I'm rooting for.
her and Elena Deladon would be tons of fun, and like I think kind of lessening some of the burden on Deladon to have to kind of like define that team in some ways, I think would be really good for her, just where she's been at the last couple of years. Selfishly, I say it's the Liberty, just because I think her going with someone on the up and up like an Ionescu, they get Jonquel Jones, like that is just like a loaded team that has players like Dede Richards and others that can like fill out some of their depth for the current moment. I also selfishly will get the in terms of my availability to go see.
Yeah, you have some vested interest in this. You should be honest here.
Yo, this is 100%
journalistic integrity.
Yeah, so I live in Cleveland where there used to be a WNBA team, and they should bring back the Rockers or put one in Columbus that I can drive to. I'm willing to go watch the Columbus Crew, put a WNBA team in Columbus and give me Caitlin Clark, and I will drive to go see that team in 2 years. Let's go. But I can the two games that I will think I'd be able to see this year are one in Chicago in June and then one in New York in August based on some travel I have. I would like to see Breanna Stewart play basketball twice, health permitting. Personally, I would like to see her play.
Fine.
Let me see Stewie in person. She is on the list of players that I have not seen that I would very much like to go see in person. It is her and the Aces, I believe, are the game in August in New York. So I could check off Asia Wilson, Kelsey Plum, Ionescu, Stewie all in one game. Sign me up. That selfishly, so Stewie to Liberty for selfish reasons. Let's go.
Totally fine. Let's transition to a segment that I kind of want to put a title to here in our first show, Chris, and lead into what the big main event of the episode is, which is the 5 trades we want to see right now. We each did 5. Mine are currently redacted. Yours, you just redacted as well.
That's right.
We're going to go back and forth on those here from our outline, but we're going to get to the Toronto Raptors first. They are the team when we're talking about the NBA trade deadline, which is on February 9th, coming up here in 2-ish weeks, just over 2 weeks, that seem to be at the center of everything. The segment that I want to start today is people love this idea of this league, right? Mark Stein coined it. They just created a podcast around it with him and Chris Haynes. We're going to make fun of that, I think, a little bit here and lean into the ridiculousness of NBA Twitter. I think it can be a pretty fruitful way for us to have some fun with this crazy league that we're doing a podcast about. Last week, our guy Robbie Callen, friend of the show, put up a breakdown of what the Toronto Raptors players were worth, according to some sort of league executive, or it says multiple league sources. Count me as skeptical. Calling OG Anunoby 2 promising players and a pick is what it's going to cost him. Fred VanVleet, point guard over there, 28 years old, ending his contract this summer. A proven winner and a great leader will fetch at least the Anunoby price, if not more. You had Pascal Siakam, 3-for-1 players plus pick, which is just insanity. And then Gary Trent Jr., a player and multiple picks. Gary Trent Jr. is all of the advanced metrics paint him as a negative player. But if you're going to get him from the Raptors, according to multiple league sources, you, Chris, are going to need to trade multiple players and picks to get Gary Trent. Then, just before we hit record, and I don't know if you saw this, a mystery team, according to Bruce Arthur, who's a reputable reporter, Toronto Star, has covered this team a long time. A mystery team, quote unquote, has offered 3 first-round picks for OG Anunoby.
That's too many picks for OG Anunoby, who I really like, and I have he's on my fake trade list, but that is too many picks for OG Anunoby. What are we doing here? What are we doing?
Are the Raptors getting the entirety of the 2023 draft back for their core players up at the trade deadline this year? Is that what this is headed toward?
Are the value of the Toronto Raptors players the FTX crypto scam of NBA trade values? Is that where we're at? This feels inflated. I would give up 3 for Siakam if I was a win now team. He's really good, all NBA, whatever.
Yeah,
3 for
he's
3
on my
for
list.
3 for Anunoby is crazy. 2 for Gary Trent Jr., who's on gonna be on an expiring contract because he can opt out, is crazy to me. How many 2 for VanVleet, considering his age, considering you have to pay.
He's also expiring.
These are crazy. These are crazy. These feel very inflated to me. I like a lot of these players. I think Toronto is clearly one of the teams that I kind of feel maybe should just kind of blow it up and see what you could do. But boy, I don't know about these values, man. These feel inflated and like. I don't know, like, if I'm making this FTX comp, I'm not exactly trying to say that, like, Masai Ujiri or Bobby
No.
Webster is Sam Fried-Bankman or whatever, but, like,
No, but here's
I'm
the
asking,
thing.
I'm pondering it.
I think you have a point. I feel like just for the record here that if you look at their cap sheet, we'll talk about specific trades for some of these guys on our 5 trades lists here in a second. If you look at their cap sheet, they pretty much have it clean starting in the 2024 offseason, which is only like 18 months from now. Mm-hmm. I kind of lean toward start to offload, explore the market. But if your plan ultimately is to build around probably Anunoby and Barnes as things currently stand, then why not just stay competitive the next 2 years, stay in a mode where you could still buy, and then you're basically able to blow it up in 2024 regardless of what you really prefer to do, because everybody can leave. They're all going to be unrestricted free agents. But this speaks to this whole hoopla we're seeing. It speaks to the incredible value in the NBA with the way the media game works of being liked. Because, and this is very similar to Sam Bankman-Fried, I think, very similar to some of these media darlings we see in other spaces. Everybody loves Masai Ujiri in the media. He can, I think there's some, he's a hard ass, but he's well liked. And boy, does it help to be well liked when you can tell Bruce Arthur, or you can have your cronies tell Bruce Arthur that you're getting ludicrous offers 3 weeks before the trade deadline for a player that may or may not actually even be available, or that you can have multiple league sources thinking that you're such a superhero with this stuff that you're about to take the entire 2023 lottery for yourself with a little bit of an offloading month. So it's silly to me, but it's amazing to be a personable guy. Are you personable? Do you get these kinds of things leaked about you in the media, Chris? Or are they just painting a glowing portrait of you every time that you're talked about?
No, when I'm talked about in the media, or like not in the media because no one cares, but if I'm talked about among friends, or like, we got to get Chris to stop listening to Boy Genius records because he's just being sad, and like that's the energy, and I'm just like, yeah, that's true, but I do that. Like, but no, this is a lot. This is where, like, I just do I with stuff like this. And with where the NBA trade market just kind of is right now, post like the Gobert trade and the DeJounte Murray trade and the Donovan Mitchell trade, I don't know what to make of any values right now. I don't. And like, if you're Toronto, like, maybe you hold out for stuff and say like, okay, like, we're not really going to get into the Wemby race, so maybe we should just hold out for the most value possible. Maybe we end up as like the 7 seed anyway. Maybe that happens. Like, it's possible. They have talent. It's just the value on some of the stuff is like very weird. It's very, very weird. Like, coming up with the fake trades. Like, I've one that I was like, oh, like, I don't know who to. I'm almost going to ask you. Like, I don't know who has to give up picks in some of this to some degree. It's like it's very, very bizarre.
It's hilarious too, and to close the chapter on this Raptors conversation, although they'll be back in our mouths in a second. NBA people love this team so much. Their fans love this team so much, and they have so many because they represent an entire freaking continent or country. If you remember, not even a year ago, they were the sexy upset pick of the first round against the Philadelphia 76ers. Everybody thought we were getting an upset in the first round because no one believes in James Harden, no one believes in Joel Embiid, and there was a lot of smart people out there saying, look at the Raptors. It's their time. They're gonna make a run. They were good in the second half of last year's regular season. So if they get into the playoffs, if they get into the play-in, you can bet that they will be overhyped in the sports books and the NBA media. There will be at least a little pocket that is picking them in the first round to upset the 3 seed or whatever they end up doing. You can literally etch it into stone right now. But let's transition into our 5 trades that we want to see right now. Again, this is not crazy stuff that we're just cooking up in a dream machine that we want because it would bring chaos. We're reading the tea leaves. We're maybe have a little bit of a vested interest in the teams that we want to see improve, the teams we like watching, what we think they might need. But these aren't, let's get Stephen Curry to the Cavs. It's not that. although that would never happen. Cleveland would burn to the ground, I think, Chris. But
The
I'm going to go with my number
Draymond
5.
the Draymond one would be better. Let's get a Draymond to Cleveland fake
Okay.
trade just to see it, like how
Another big man.
if you can flip the intense booze with that Michigan State grit that Dan Gilbert also loves. Continue.
I'm going to do my number 5, which is not Raptors related. I'm going to unredact it here on our sheet. It is Golden State Warriors related. Kelly Olynyk, who is currently on the Utah Jazz, a team that I believe is going to be tearing it down to a degree this deadline, even though they've been much better than expected, and their offense is super duper fun, very effective, very efficient. Olynyk has been a big part of that. I don't see why, if you're rebuilding around all these draft picks and Larry Markkinen and whatever else, that you need Kelly Olynyk on your team. The Warriors do need Kelly Olynyk. They don't have a lot to trade because all their players make a ton of money or very little money, but the one guy in the middle salary-wise is James Wiseman. We know who James Wiseman is. On the outs with the team, spent a lot of the season in the G League, former number 1 overall pick. And JaMychal Green, who has been pretty bad for them and hasn't really stayed healthy or in the rotation most of the season. Those two guys to the Utah Jazz for Kelly Olynyk. The Warriors get their Nemanja Bjelica replacement. They get that toolsy passing big man that they always seem to love, and their rotation's pretty much set. So how do you feel? Tell me why I'm wrong.
I like this trade. I think the Warriors should be one of the teams most aggressively trying to buy. You have a window now. We'll see what happens with Draymond. We'll see what just kind of happens. The Jordan Poole contract obviously kicks in next year, and then things are going to get very, very expensive for them, and they already kind of are. Olynyk would make a ton of sense. They just need, I think, a little more from that spot. Kevon Looney has been awesome for them. You'll get a ton of Draymond at the 5, and that's what
not starting right now.
No, but
which is weird.
Yeah, but you're in the playoffs, you're gonna get a ton of Draymond at the 5, and that makes me wonder how much they'll kind of give up for someone who's going to need to play minutes at the 5 to really be effective for them. But in terms of giving them real depth and giving them someone that fits what they do, I think this trade is this is kind of a no-brainer. The Jazz are also one of those teams that, based on what we've read and what has been kind of reported out there, I don't know what they're looking for. And they already have a ton of picks from the Mitchell trade. There's this reporting of, I think from Mark Stein, that was Malik Beasley to Cleveland, John Collins to Utah, and Karis LeVert going to Atlanta, and salary relief for the Hawks, that the Jazz were the ones who wanted picks. And that John Collins, I think, is the best player in that trade, but they're looking for picks. So what are they going to do? Maybe the market changes as we get closer and teams just want to do something, but I wonder if there is just I do wonder if what the price is going to be that kind of hinders some of these moves on the edges. But I really, really like this trade in principle. Olynyk is good. He is not an all-star, not anything crazy. He had that weird kind of sojourn in Houston after his time in Boston and time in Miami, but that's a good player, a good rotation player that I think would definitely help the Warriors or another team if they could go get him.
Yeah, from the Jazz standpoint, I just kind of find it hard to believe they're going to get a pick for Olynyk. So to me, Wiseman, I thought you were going to come at me and say it's insane to trade a former number 1 overall pick for Kelly Olynyk.
He's just not good. We're in year 3.
He might be.
But we're entering 2 years away from being 2 years away territory with him a little bit. It hasn't happened, and that to me, yes, is that selling very low in theory and the name value, but the reality is that he is not that anymore. He's not. It's the same thing. If the Magic tried to trade Markelle Fultz today, his value is not tied to him being a number 1 overall pick anymore. It's that he's a competent NBA player with some upside, and he's better than, he's obviously done more and been better than what Wiseman has been so far. And that is, I think, just where you're at with him. I don't, and if I'm him, maybe it's maybe in some ways better to go somewhere else at this point. I don't know if it's Utah because Walker Kessler is just awesome, but maybe a change of scenery would do him some good.
Very fair. I think if it gets you closer to a championship, which I think this trade undoubtedly would. Remember, they're without Otto Porter and Bjelica, both guys who played in the finals for them. You get a little closer with Olynyk, and I think that they would feel like that increases their championship odds. So yes, you're cutting ties with somebody who you invested a lot in, but so be it. They're in win now mode. Obviously, they have maybe the best player in the NBA on their team. All right, your number 5. Chris.
My
Give us your number 5 trade.
my number 5 is a very basic person trade. Alex Caruso to the Sacramento Kings for Davion Mitchell, not Donovan Mitchell, Trey Lyles, and a protected first round pick, lottery protected for a year, rolls over, whatever. I think the Kings are just like one of the best stories in the NBA this year, if not the best. I love light the beam. Let's go. Shouts to Mike Brown for doing an awesome job there. I'm glad he's got another chance to be a head coach. One of the clear spots in the rotation you could reasonably improve upon at this deadline, I think, is at that backup point guard spot behind De'Aaron Fox. Caruso strikes me as just a very, very Mike Brown player. He's obviously got a little bit of PJ Tucker to him now where he doesn't want to shoot, and that's a little bit weird, but amazing defender, really affordable contract. And Davion Mitchell is fine. He's obviously a former lottery pick. This is maybe selling low on him as well. But if I'm the Kings, I look at Caruso as a guy for the next couple of years that could be a really good pairing with Fox. They could play them together. Protected first, okay, maybe it rolls over. Maybe it's a 16th pick next year. I think that's a good move for Caruso. And if you're the Bulls, I know they're surging a little bit. I know things are going a little bit better there, but that is another team that feels like a reset would make some sense, particularly if whatever happens with Lonzo Ball. Get it protected first. Try to rehab Davion Mitchell as you kind of move off from the Kobe White pick and all of that stuff. I think this is a trade that it's small. It's nothing crazy, but I think Caruso to the Kings just makes a lot of sense to me. And it would also be fun to maybe get a Kings-Lakers series where Lakers fans get really mad when Alex Caruso's just doing Alex Caruso stuff against Russell Westbrook and Pat Bev.
Caruso's contract is a steal, $9 million this year, $9.5 million next year, and then it's only partially guaranteed for $3 million the final year. That's going to be guaranteed. You can bet on that. He won't be cut, obviously. So I understand the Bulls have been. I think there's been some stuff out there that he's one of the only untouchable players on the roster, probably partially because of that contract. But that's BS. We know the Bulls are not going to actually get caught in a position where they need to reset some things, and they're going to prevent themselves from making moves because they want to carry a player who at his best is a very high level role player. He's not, a superstar. So I love that trade. I think from the Kings standpoint, it makes a lot of sense, gives them a little bit more defense, gives them somebody who frankly would probably be in their closing lineup. Mm-hmm. They haven't fully found who that 2 guard is going to be next to De'Aaron Fox to close games, and I think he would be a very, very good option. All right, my number 4 here.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
My number 4 here is Jakob Poeltl to the Denver Nuggets. This is it's kind of hilarious. This is the idea that started this entire pod topic, which is embarrassing. For you and I.
No. I love Jakob Poeltl. Jakob Poeltl is in that firm range of very competent NBA center who does a lot of stuff well, has a big glaring weakness in his free throw shooting, but is just a good player and not a dominant one at a position where it is very much kind of stars and scrubs for a lot of teams right now.
I had an extra one that we can get to as a rapid fire at the end here that was about a big man, and it's hard to find players, centers on this market and in general in the NBA. So the Nuggets have liked Zeke Naji. This has changed over the past few weeks since we first brainstormed this topic. They really seem to like Zeke Naji as their backup 5, but the non-Jokic minutes are a real problem for them. I don't think Poeltl's going to fully fix it, but when you have Bones Highland playing backup guard for you, and he is just a sieve on defense, letting guys into the paint, just having that stability of a defender at that spot, I think would be pretty good. And if you can get him for Ish Smith and your recent first-round pick, Peyton Watson, I think you do it. I don't know if that's enough. The Spurs would be correct, as we just said, with how few centers there are to ask for a first-round pick or something. It probably depends on how they view the Nuggets' young players. But that one feels pretty good to me. Poeltl's not going to go to a playoff team and start. So backing up maybe the MVP and playing a big role on a team that might be the favorite for the championship right now, I think you could do a lot worse. And it's a good fit for both sides.
Yeah, I think Denver is another team that I think should be trying to buy. They have a clear window right now to try and win a title. They do. The Jokic is playing absurd. They got Murray back. They have Porter back. Maybe in backup center would seem to be the obvious place. You're probably not going to go get another big wing upgrade, and they're pretty well stocked there with guys like Bruce Brown and Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. and Jeff Green is giving them good minutes still.
KCP.
Yeah, shout out KCP, who's just like that. What a trade for them. Yeah, like I'm a big Monty Morris fan, but like what a trade to bring in KCP. I wonder if I do wonder if like this maybe feels a little bit rich, and or if they try to kind of thread the needle a little bit more and find someone they could maybe re-sign. Pirtle's apparently per shams like looking for like $20 million a year in the summer. So like this would be, if this is a rental, this is kind of a situation where like I would think it makes a ton of sense. But would they call him like Mason Plumlee, their old friend who's now with the Hornets? Like, is there a way they could go that's like a little bit cheaper that kind of fills the same need? And I also kind of wonder if there's just no way to avoid the Jokic drop off because he's Jokic. Like I don't know if there's anyone you could reasonably get that's not also like a superstar that's going to kind of insulate you from some of this Jokic drop off stuff. But Pirtle,
and in the West, you don't need a center necessarily, right? I mean, that's the thing about the West. You're not going to go up against Joel Embiid. You're the team that other teams need to get a center for to guard Jokic. But maybe the Nuggets don't feel like they really need to address that spot because who does he need to guard in the post? And you can make do without him.
Olynyk would be good for them too, I think. If he were not to go to Golden State, I wouldn't mind the Olynyk fit there as well to give them a little stretch and like do some 5-out stuff. That could be fun. Should we go to my number? All right, 3-team trade. Our first 3-teamer of the day. I don't know if you have any 3-teamers. This is my only one.
I don't. They scare me.
This one scares me, and this is the one that I alluded to earlier, where I'm going to ask you who has to give up picks. So I have Josh Hart and Doug McDermott going to Cleveland. Josh Hart coming from Portland. Doug McDermott coming from San Antonio. Jetty Osman goes out to Portland. Karis LeVert goes to San Antonio. Here's the deal here, I think. The Cavs are in desperate need of wing stuff. They're in desperate need of like competent bodies on the wing. They need shooting. Hart and McDermott are going to give you some shooting. Hart's going to give you defense. They're both under contract for another year at pretty reasonable numbers. Hart's contract's like a little funky because I think it's like once you guarantee it, it's in like non-guaranteed for next year or like whatever. There's an option or something. It's a goofy contract, but like he's a good player. I think would make a ton of sense. Portland is in this weird spot where I think they're kind of stuck in the middle again. So this is like punting on Hart a little bit for a slightly worse player in Jetty Osman, but save a little bit of money, still have a shooter on your roster. Okay. And for San Antonio, it's like, okay, trade McDermott, you're going to save a bunch of money on getting LeVert, and you do that. That is where I kind of wonder who has to give up the pick, or like if there's another team you could sub in here that also could use like a McDermott or a Hart instead of the Cavs. But I think the Cavs are going to look for wing upgrades. I think this is kind of maybe on the higher end of what I'm expecting them to get. But what do you make of what would Hart and McDermott like even help them that much? Is I guess my question to you.
Yeah, I think the Spurs need more if they're taking on LeVert's salary. I know he's a good player, but I think that they will see that at expiring. He is expiring. That's true. That's fair. So
2 seconds, like
I was also going to say that the Cavs are going to probably be the team that would have to give.
Yeah, that's fine.
They're going to have to give the picks. I also want to tell you before we get any further, because I have a feeling we might hear about this again. I had this in my head before we even started the podcast. We're on episode number 1. I have a buzzer sound effect. You're at 4 Cavs references today. Yeah. When you get to 5, the buzzer will go off. That's just fine. We have to have a handshake agreement.
That's fine.
When as we go through this.
That's fine.
It's not even negative.
Yeah.
The Cavs, I think, get better here. Portland fans, I will say, and I have a Josh Hart trade in mind too.
Okay.
Josh Hart, they don't like how you mentioned the PJ Tucker effect. He's on that level right now. And they have been very frustrated with how little he shoots the ball. I think he helps the Cavs maybe actually more, though, because he gives them some of the perimeter wing defense that they really are lacking. Doug McDermott basically just fills the Jetty Osman role, right? I like this deal. I think the LeVert aspect is what hangs me up on it. It feels like simultaneously very little return for LeVert, but also if I'm the Spurs, I have no use for LeVert. He's just this albatross weird guy in the league. He's been that almost his whole career. But that's the hang up that I have is involving LeVert. But the Cavs kind of have to, right, in order to get a deal done.
Yeah, he's the guy they have to trade, and I think would be an elite move to get deeper and deeper into the Wemby race if I'm the Spurs. That's the pitch. Any team you're calling, if you're a team, I think calling the Spurs, the Hornets, the Rockets, any of these teams that are like actively bad and actively probably trying to get themselves firmly into that Wemby race, you're saying, look, you're bad. We can make you worse. We don't need to give you a first-round pick. We'll give you 2 seconds. It's fine. You're going to maybe get Wemby. It's dangling the Wemby carrot or Scoot Henderson over all of this. That's if I'm the GM in that situation, that's what I'm doing. But if I'm Cleveland, I probably would give up some seconds for this trade. I think I would.
Problem is, I think LeVert actually helps them get a little better.
Does he?
If
Does
they play
he though?
him, but maybe they just buy him out.
Yeah,
I don't know. It is a maybe it's a lose trade, but that ends up sometimes being what the 3-team deals do. All right, my timing on the Cavs fun that I was poking at you was intentional here, Chris, because I'm bringing up the Suns next in my number 3 trade, which involves our Toronto Raptors, who we spoke about a second ago. Pascal Siakam to the Phoenix Suns. This is an actual blockbuster. We're done with the silly baby stuff here. For DeAndre Ayton, Cameron Payne, 3 first-round picks, and 2 swaps. This is the Donovan Mitchell deal a little bit, although Pascal's a little older, so maybe the Suns don't have to give up quite so much. Maybe it's 2 picks and 2 swaps. Maybe it's just 3 picks and no swaps, whatever. The pick part of it is probably where the difference comes. Siakam is about as good of a forward fit as I could possibly imagine for the Suns. They pursued Domantas Sabonis at last year's trade deadline. No one really knows how far that got. It doesn't seem like it was ever super duper close. They obviously he gets to the Kings. Ayton has been very up and down. This has been a poor season for him by his standards overall. And he got that contract. He's a very, very expensive player now compared to his production. And so they go for it. They take a big swing. They've said with this new owner, they're going to be willing to be aggressive, be willing to give up picks and add big-time salary. I think this could get the job done, helping the team, resetting a little bit after DeAndre Ayton, giving Devin Booker more of a reliable number 2 going forward with Chris Paul aging out of the core group for this team. Maybe he's still on the team in the future, but he's not going to be the number 2 star you want. And so this checks a lot of boxes. We do have to return, though, to the fact that the Raptors probably think that that collective bargaining agreement rules don't even allow for a trade big enough for what you'd have to do to get Siakam out of Toronto.
Ayton's a good starting. Ayton is like the centerpiece and he's already locked up on his contract, plus all the picks for a team that like you could absolutely convince him that like things could go weird for the Suns and those picks are really good picks. You could convince even with Book, you could convince me of that. So I get it. I love how aggressive this is from you. I think this would put some life into the Suns. It would change the style of play, I think, in an interesting way. Do you think they would be okay enough at center in this post-Ayton world if it's like Jock Landale minutes and Sarge minutes?
Yeah.
Like are they fine with that?
So this is one of those that it's a little more likely in the summer. That's the real hang-up that I have with an Ayton trade in season. I do think it's more likely than maybe the average NBA fan would think, just based on their memories in the intro to our podcast, the big moments that he's had. But they don't have a center to start behind him. They have Bismack Biyombo, whatever, not great players. But they have other things that they could still do here. We know Jay Crowder is still going to be on the market. Notice I didn't put him in this trade. So they could be in the market for some pretty major shakeup at the deadline. And I feel like this could be one of multiple moves where maybe Siakam becomes your 4. You get a center elsewhere. There's going to be buyout guys. We just talked about it with Denver, Mason Plumlee, whatever. And then you roll. Maybe you're cutting your continuity and everything, obviously, this season. But you set yourself up for the future and sell a little higher on Ayton maybe than what he would be this summer.
Yeah, I like this trade a lot. I want to pair this, Brendon, with my number 2. I'm going to skip my number 3. I'll come back to because I also made a Suns trade. And I don't think it's a trade that's going to happen now because of what happened with Rui Hachimura. But how about Kyle Kuzma to the Suns for Jay Crowder for a first, maybe like another second? I don't really like. This is partially just like I think the Wizards are an extreme like let's just move on from what you're trying to do situation. Like it's time. Like it is rip the Band-Aid off, just be bad. But they're not going to do that. Obviously, it seems they're going to re-sign Kuz and Beal's got this big contract and all this stuff. But if they were going to like ever pivot, this would be the kind of trade that I think would make a ton of sense for them to do. And if I'm Phoenix, I absolutely can talk myself into being like, okay, we got a 4 who can shoot it. We got another body to kind of do some of that stuff. We can play a little bit smaller with him, replaces what we're missing from Crowder. like it's a little bit younger. We can probably re-sign him because it's a market that maybe he wants to be in and all that stuff. I don't know like what the picks would have to be. It's maybe a first and like a second, something like that. I wouldn't probably go more than that. And you're betting on Kuzma kind of going back to some of the DNA that helped him be a contributor to that Lakers title team. He's not been, I think, the same defender in DC that he was at the end of that Lakers run, when obviously he was just buying into that very specific role. He's expanded a little bit since then. But I would.
Oh yeah, he's 20 plus a game now.
Yeah, he gets up the shot, and the defense is just different, and I get that. It's a different circumstance. He's trying to expand, but if you put him back in this context, I could see this making sense for both teams, and I just also wanted to find something to do with Jay Crowder's contract if I'm the Suns. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know like how anyone could trade for him right now and expect him to like show up and be like ready to go right away, unless he's just like been in great shape this whole time he's been away. But
I'm a little less worried about that. Yeah, the reason I didn't include a Crowder trade here is because I think it's going to be a 3-team trade, and it's just so messy that doing the math on it was just going to be bad podcasting, probably more than anything. But I think Kuzma, I will agree. Kuzma would be good on the Suns. I think that they could give up enough to get him. Probably not and Siakam, right? With my trade, it would be a different pathway for them. I think he'd be good on the Grizzlies. I think he'd be good back to the Lakers. I think any team could use Kyle Kuzma. I think the Wizards probably don't need Kyle Kuzma, and that's kind of where I want to go, is that move and the signals that they're sending out post this Rui trade are absolutely stupid. The idea that Kuzma is somebody worth doubling down on when the rest of the roster is in the shape that it's in is crazy to me. Bradley Beal is a very, very good player. He's probably not quite, at the level that maybe his salary would indicate. That's fine, but that's it. It's Beal and then Porzingis, who also has contract stuff coming up. He's no sure thing to be there long term. He's no sure thing to be available long term. And then Kuzma is going to be your third player, and you're making moves to reinforce that he's going to stay your third best player.
Yeah,
craziness.
And they whiffed on Johnny. And they whiffed on Johnny Davis. They absolutely whiffed on Johnny Davis.
They whiffed on so many picks. They just traded a pick that they whiffed on, right? So
yeah.
I don't understand what's going on with Kuzma. And what we can maybe move on from to highlight the Wizards' insanity is he's an unrestricted free agent. It doesn't matter to Kyle Kuzma what the hell they did with Rui Hachimura, right? He could leave. It doesn't matter. Like, they don't have, yes, they have bird rights, whatever, but anybody can pay him. And there's a lot more teams with cap space this summer than there were last year. He's going to want to get paid more than anything because he's probably been underpaid his whole career. He was a big overachiever as a late first round pick. He was a little underpaid on this contract for especially with the production he's putting up now. I don't know why I would want to stay in Washington if I'm Kyle Kuzma. What have they done for me? That's not like it's a winning situation. So it's all bananas. I think he would be good on the Suns. I think he would be good anywhere. I think he's a really, really great role player for a championship team. But I'm not really sure how the Wizards got themselves into this situation. Can I move on to my number two?
Absolutely.
All right. My number two is John Collins, who was just in a write-up from Chris Haynes this morning that he continues to be available, which has been the case for like 2.5 years now. And that Portland is also looking to improve. So I already had this trade down, but if my great personal friend Chris Haynes agrees with me, then all the better. For Josh Hart, so Collins to Portland for Josh Hart, Nasir Little, and a 2025 lottery-protected first-round pick. Looking at it again with fresh eyes, that seems very, very little. But I also think that there's going to hit a point at this trade deadline when the Hawks are just going to have to look themselves in the mirror and say, our whole front office is getting fired, in part because we can't seem to get these deals done. They've had this whole turnover in their front office. We don't know what their future is going to be. They just made a big move for DeJounte Murray, and still they have a player they don't want on their roster. They're just going to have to take a deal that's out there. I think getting a pick from a team that's usually around the middle in the Trailblazers, along with Little, who I still think can be a pretty decent role player. He'll be a restricted free agent this summer. And Hart, who is a serviceable guy who I think actually could still play and be productive next to that Murray-Trae Young tandem in the backcourt. I feel like it works, but I'm sure Hawks fans are going to think it's a stupid undersell. I think the value that Atlanta ends up getting for Collins is going to be a lot closer to this than what we've heard, in the rumor mill for a couple years now.
I think you're right. I think if they were going to get something like great for John Collins, it might have already happened.
Yep.
And we're how many years? How many years are we into this? Right? Like this is a very.
I mean, I think he was available at the pre-COVID trade deadline, so that's how long.
Yeah, we're just internally in John Collins trade rumors, and I kind of like hope for him. It would kind of be cool to see him in a new environment and get to like be somewhere else and maybe get a chance to kind of reset the kind of weird vibes of being an Atlanta Hawk. Portland would be an interesting one just because, like as you said, they're kind of in the middle. They also have Jeremy Grant there, and I think him and Grant could be like fun 4-5 stuff with Dame. And
Yep.
I don't think that totally moves the needle for Portland in a big way, but I like it just for like maybe it gives them a little bit of a more of a puncher's chance. And if you're trying to do that with Dame, I can't really blame them for doing that.
I think it's a pretty good puncher's chance, actually. I really like this for Portland, probably even more than Atlanta, just because, like you said, I mean, Collins at the 5, maybe they have Nurkic still. They still have Gary Payton Jr., who has recently come back, and Jeremy Grant, Anthony Simons. You start to have a pretty nice 5-man unit option there. I don't know if it's championship caliber, but it's pretty hard to get there when you have Lillard and Simons already locked in long term. I think this gets them closer. But what is your number 2? Oh, you did your number 2.
Yeah, it's your number 2. Let's go back to number 3. So this was inspired by the Hachimura trade, and the Bucks reported interest in Hachimura. I'm going to send Grayson Allen and 3-4 second-round picks, whatever it takes, to the Detroit Pistons for Saddiq Bey. Bucks are sneaky kind of old. Look at Chris Middleton's age. Look at Drew Middleton.
I talked about a Chris Middleton. I thought about a Chris Middleton trade on my list today. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah, it's something that I think they have to be very cognizant of, particularly with Middleton possibly, I think, has a player option for next year, and that could get you in some – they're in a weird spot. They need to get a little younger. Grayson Allen is like fine, but I think they have in some ways missed some of what PJ Tucker gave them. Saddiq Bey is not going to be that 1-for-1, but he's a younger guy that at that size – that the Pistons are reportedly have said we'll trade him for a first. Maybe this doesn't get it done. I don't know. But if I'm the Bucks, this is like an on the margins kind of trade I would pursue. You get a shooter in Bey who can be a big body. You flip Allen for something. You have to pay Bey eventually, and you can figure that out. But it kind of gives you some youthful energy. It gives you some size. It gives you some 3-4 combo stuff to play with Giannis if you're going to play Giannis at the 5 some in the playoffs. This is it's a smaller move for the Bucks, and this is maybe about as big as they can get considering where their assets are at, unless they're going to say, hey, Chris Middleton, and we'll do that, and we'll figure that out. But I like them just kind of trying to get a little bit younger, give them something that fits well with Giannis at the 5, and Grayson Allen is like a very, I think, reasonable thing to kind of flip here.
Absolutely. I like this trade a lot. I think Bey has a lot of untapped potential. I mean, it's a dude who, when he gets hot, it really is up there with almost anyone in the NBA. I mean, he scored 50 points. He can have some big 3-point nights. I think the rounding out of the rest of his game has been a little bit of a struggle. I feel like there's a version of him that maybe is a little bit more athletic if he, commits to that and getting right in terms of his shape and everything else. I feel like even dating back to Villanova, there were questions about that stuff. So maybe getting into a veteran system with a championship organization helps that getting out of Detroit. But I just want to remind people, okay, where the Bucks rotation was when they won a championship. All right. Do you know who played the 5th most minutes in the 2021 NBA Finals when the Bucks won the title?
Oh, is it PJ Tucker?
So PJ Tucker was 4th. The catch here is Brook Lopez was 6th, so it kind of screws things up because he got benched a couple times. Pat Connaughton was 5th, and PJ Tucker was 4th. So Pat Connaughton was a difference-making, humongous impact player in a finals for this team. They don't need a lot to get Giannis at his best. Right now, they are just really in the dumps because Grayson Allen is hit or miss. They have Jordan Nwora, Javon Carter, guys like that. They got Ingles recently. He should make an impact. I think Bey gets you a lot closer to it as well. I think this really would affect, maybe it's a few points on the, championship odds lines, but I think it really would make a difference. I like this one.
Would you prefer him or Hachimura? The Bucks are as Jake Fisher, I think, kind of most notably reported this. Yeah, I would prefer Bey as well. I think he's had the bigger scoring nights. in the shooting. It's the shooting. He is a better 3-point shooter, and I think he's just like a little like he's a little thicker. And like if I'm gonna get a 3.5. Give me the guy that's just got like the bulk, and I prefer the bulk if I can get it. I think like a lot of teams should be calling on Saddiq Bey. I don't really know why the Pistons would totally move on from him, but say la vie, that's another conversation.
Yeah, and they've been hard to read, right? Like we don't know what they want for Bogdanovich and Alec Burks. They want first round picks for both of those guys. Maybe they will trade Bey, maybe they won't trade Bey. It seems like all their young guys get hurt all the time, so they're a weird team to read. I think they will be active at the deadline. All right, my number one is returning full circle to our Toronto Raptors. They're our now. I don't know if you caught that, but they belong to us. Fred VanVleet to the Orlando Magic for Jalen Suggs, Chuma Okeke, Terrence Ross, that's just salary, and a top 5 protected 2024 first round pick. Now, I didn't want to give up Orlando's pick this year because I don't think VanVleet does enough to get them out of the lottery, and you want that pick.
Yes. But
next year, when Franz Wagner is fully the MVP of the NBA, and you have Paolo Banchero in year 2, I feel like you want to have that season be when you're moving forward. So you get one more lottery pick this year probably because VanVleet's not going to overhaul the team, but you get your point guard of the future. You get him with the anticipation that you're going to re-sign him, and he becomes the guard. They haven't had success. They've drafted so many. They acquired Markelle Fultz, and yet you still feel like that primary playmaker guard spot, and VanVleet's not quite that, is still up in the air. I like it because VanVleet can shoot. He's going to be in a situation kind of like he's in Toronto right now where the forwards can handle the ball enough that his shooting actually becomes the best skill. He doesn't have to be the point guard of the team, but he also brings a little bit of veteran, know-how, comfort, etc. as they try to take that step forward and win. I think from a skill standpoint, from a time and place standpoint for where the Magic want to go, and that price, maybe it is another one where it's a little bit low. I would be willing to give up another first-round pick that's protected, probably if that's what it took. Maybe a player different than Suggs if they like a different young guy. But I really like the fit. If I'm the Magic, I would be looking pretty hard at VanVleet if he's available.
Yeah, I like this trade. I think there is some risk because I like, especially defensively, what Suggs has been when he's been healthy. I think he's still like a very interesting. He's not like up there with the rest of that 2021 class, and like he's the worst of the Magic picks in there. Like Franz is better, like, and the guys at the top of that draft are better, but I think he's still an intriguing player. He feels like a Toronto guy, like in terms of like the in-your-face defensive guard stuff. I feel like that guy fits kind of what they would do. So I think it's kind of a one-for-one that I think makes sense. I think you're right on saying don't do the 2023 pick. Do the 2024 pick. Do not trade. Like if you get lottery luck this year, or like if they want the 2023 pick, make it top 3 protected or something. Like slap some more protections on it if they're really gonna press you for that. I like this trade
right now in the lottery odds, and they have a pretty good cushion between them and Washington, and it's kind of that top 5 in the lottery right now are the teams that are actually trying to lose, and then after that you get to teams that are accidentally losing, and so Orlando. They're not going to probably get much lower than 5th, and you don't want to give up a pick where you're slotted at 5. That's danger. Yeah. So I think that the picks is probably a little bit of where this goes, and then it is going to be: does Toronto actually like Jalen Suggs, and does Fred VanVleet actually want to sign with the Magic? Because you can't do this trade unless you get some whispers that he's going to re-sign there, because then you're right back to he's unrestricted like Kuzma. Does he even want to stay? You're giving up all this stuff for somebody who's going to leave. But if all those pieces come together, I do think this is a realistic trade.
Yeah, Chris Haynes has it too that VanVleet switching agents, so kind of worth factoring in this as well. Also, this is the Terrence Ross homecoming. Cue the music, cue the Skylar Gray and P. Diddy. Let's go. We're
for coming 2 months. He's
back.
Back.
Terrence Ross is back. Let's go. It could be fun. Let's go. We'll go to my number one. This is also a Toronto Raptors trade. OG Anunoby, we talked about them wanting 3 picks for. I'm sorry, you're gonna get not 3 picks in this fake trade because I think that's crazy. But to the Pelicans, top 5 protected 2024 pick. That's the Lakers' top 5 protected 2024 pick, mind you. A 2025 unprotected pick from the Pelicans, and then Devontae Graham and Jackson Hayes for salary matching purposes. Look, I think the West is open. I think the Pelicans should go for it. Let's throw some chips on the table. Let's get another great wing defender. Can you imagine him and not on Herb Jones just like locking people up in the playoffs and then playing small with like Ingram at the 4 and these big wings? I think it's a really, really interesting look for New Orleans if they wanted to go that route. This is the guy that, Brendon, if I'm looking at like who I would, unless you could get Siakam and it's like you're Dallas and you're going to throw every pick you have, and maybe that's definitely probably not enough. This is the guy I would probably prioritize trying to trade of like the 4 guys we think are available in Toronto. He's really good. He's having like a very, very good defensive season. I think the Grizzlies should be calling on OG as well. A friend of the pod, Mo DeKeel, had a good one that he wrote up over at Bleacher Report that was the Grizzlies going in on OG, and I kind of feel like I missed an opportunity not putting the Grizzlies in one of these trades because I think that's another team that should buy and really go for it. But OG to the Pelicans cashed in that top 5 protected Lakers pick. They trade one of their own picks, and they have a ton of them. 2 guys that are like fine, but like you can live without Devontae Graham and Jackson Hayes. What do you think of this?
I think Raptors fans, I would change the locks on your house and put up some chicken wire in the glass on your windows. I think that I said Pelicans fans. I mean Raptors fans are going to hurt you, and I think you should be worried. So to return to our buddy Robbie Callen's tweet, it would take at least two promising players on team-friendly deals and a pick to pry him away. So you're going 2 picks and what is that? 0 promising players?
Look, I'm being a realist. I'm being a realist about like how good OG Anunoby is.
I was
what I'm
say,
doing.
Don't actually back off. I'm making fun of the anonymous league executive.
I am secure. This is like I'm using real money and not like fake scam money here to make this trade. Like I'm sorry.
Yes.
Like look. I'm gonna pull up the Pelicans roster real quick, and if I can, is there a sweetener I can throw in? Is there like someone on the edges? Like you're not getting Brandon Ingram, you're not getting Zion, you're not getting McCollum, you're not getting Larry Nance Jr. You're not getting Dyson. I'm not giving you Dyson Daniels. Do you want Najee Marshall? Like I could probably give you Najee Marshall. Like fine. You want him?
I like this. I like the Pelicans as a landing spot. I like the Grizzlies as a landing spot much more than like there's been this talk. I don't remember. Oh, it was Portland, right? Who apparently the number 7 pick that became Shaedon Sharpe was on the table for OG Anunoby. That's going to be a pretty fun one to look back on in a few years, by the way. But I like Anunoby a little bit more on a team where he's growing with other young creators rather than going and being expected to be like another guy who like takes Damian Lillard over the hump or something. I believe in Anunoby's future. I believe that he has untapped offensive potential, but I'm also the type of person that wants to see it for a long stretch of time. I want to see OG Anunoby score 20 plus a game for half a season, or get a couple more assists a game for half a season before I'm going to sell a lot of that stuff to go get him, with the idea being he's going to be a creator for me on offense. On the Pelicans, he doesn't have to be that. I really like it for that reason. I wonder if he will feel like the Pelicans or the Grizzlies or whatever. Is it that different than what he's seemingly not super thrilled about playing in Toronto? That worries me. And then the other part of it is he is not as elite of a shooter as we think of him being. When you're talking about a guy going from 3-and-D to whatever's going to come next, like Jaylen Brown, like Paul George, those guys start with a pretty good base of being above average shooters. OG Anunoby's at 37% for his career. He had a 40% season the year the year after the bubble. He had 39% on very limited attempts the year of the bubble. And other than that, he's been pretty average or below average. That worries me too. I don't fully believe in, when I watch Toronto, the hype around OG Anunoby is just this blossom waiting to happen that the league is trying to prey upon. I feel like he might be closer to what he is right now for the rest of his career than some sort of, all-star or all-NBA guy when he gets to another team. That's what I would worry about. But you're talking about a good situation for him, so maybe it's worth it.
Yeah, I that's what I think. I think if I'm a team that can kind of maximize what he is and like don't need to like be concerned about what he isn't, I think it's the right fit. If you're the Raptors though, Brendon, would you prefer that Pelicans trade or this Grizzlies trade that I did on the fly? Danny Green's expiring, big body David Roddy, 2023 first, 2025 first, both unprotected for OG.
Who was the first player? Oh, Danny Green.
Yeah, Danny Green's $10 million expiring. Homecoming. Play the Skylar
return.
Gray. Play the Skylar Gray. Let's go.
They get Terrence Ross and Danny Green back. I feel like I think I can do better than that overall. I think the Raptors probably actually, and all jokes aside, can get at least better players back. And I think that's probably where their head would be, considering that they probably see Barnes as one of their core pieces. So they might not be looking to get fully like reset. We want to get that number 1 overall pick and tank our way to the bottom again. They want to get who's going to play next to Scotty Barnes. So maybe it is, a Dyson Daniels. Maybe it is more on the player side. I think that they don't trade OG though. I feel like he's only 25 years old. If they feel, no one will know better if there's untapped potential than that group of coaches and front office people. And if they feel like there is, I see the team of the future as Barnes and Anunoby. Get rid of Siakam, get rid of Van Vliet. Those two guys are who you build around. I don't really see the upside of getting rid of Anunoby. Are you going to get an asset back that isn't anywhere near as good of an asset as Anunoby is right now? I don't know. Unless you can create a bidding war, I just think it makes the most sense for him to come back, re-sign him after this underpaid contract that he's on, pay him for what he's worth, start to run things through him more, try to make him happy. It's worked for them before with Siakam, and see what happens. That's what I would do. I don't think it makes sense to trade Anunoby.
I think, trade. If I were them, I think I would probably like take whatever calls you can on like everyone that's not Barnes. But the two guys I would probably be most like wanting to move would be Van Vliet, who you talked about, and also Gary Trent Jr., who I think like a lot of teams could tell you like Gary Trent Jr. could make other teams better and kind of help teams more in the immediate need and get him as a rental. I think that's like an obvious place to go. But
knockdown shooter.
Yeah, knockdown shooter who is like very much bought into like playing up in your face like aggressive defense in Toronto, and maybe that carries over to somewhere else if he goes there. Would you rather have Karis LeVert or Gary Trent Jr. for Cleveland?
I would rather have Gary Trent Jr. because I think Cleveland just needs shooting, but I think both guys are unreliable defenders who I would not want to have guarding a, Kevin Durant in a final series or in a playoff series. I mean, maybe that's Mobley. But whatever. In general, I think I lean Trent just because if I have him spacing the floor, I feel a lot better than LeVert. But I won't give you the buzzer. That was number 5, Chris.
No, I deserve the buzzer, but in my head, I would give myself the buzzer.
Let's start it off.
Hit the buzzer.
We have to. It's episode number 1. This is going to be a bit. Well, it's a YouTube video, so pardon the.
Yeah, there we go.
All right. There we go.
When we do the Suns, when this happens with the Suns, I'm gonna have something ready for you. That's my promise.
All right, you can have whatever you need. That'll do it for episode number 1 of the Just Basketball Show. We will be back with you twice a week, every week from here until forever. Subscribe to us on the Just Basketball YouTube channel. Follow, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Give us 5 stars. We are on Instagram. We are on TikTok. We will be pumping out the content everywhere for you. We hope you're as excited as we are, and we will talk to you next week.